One of the best random themes of this channel, at least on the comments, are the people who think that I live in my car. And this is pretty good today because it looks like I don't know where it looks like I am today with this background. You see this? This is actually my daughter's room, but there's a poster board with holes in it right here in the back. This is the perfect setting for this video. I apologize for the sound machine / don't apologize for the sound machine in the background. I also apologize for my children yelling in the background / don't apologize for my children yelling in the background. You also may hear my mother. I don't apologize for that. Where to start today? All I'm going to really do today is read from Spiritual Bypassing. Like I mentioned last video, I wanted to read from Spiritual Bypassing by Robert Augustus Masters. And the reason I say that this setting, and particularly this background, is perfect, and all the noise is perfect for this video, is because the context of what Masters is talking about in the excerpt we're about to read is so much of this. My kids in the background yelling for grandma, the sound machine going on, some board with holes behind me. This is life. This is it. La vida. How I kind of got into spirituality was through Zen. And in Zen Buddhism, they talk about this stuff all the time. You know, Jack Kornfield's got that great book. Actually, Jack Kornfield's quoted in the back cover of this book. Jack Kornfield's got a book titled After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. Jack Kornfield book. Jack Kornfield, famous Buddhist American teacher and writer. And in Zen and in, many other traditions, this kind of very humble approach to spiritual practice, living your life, is really encouraged. And I've always loved that and embraced that quality. That's honestly why I make videos in the car. I don't want to have some fancy looking studio where I tell you this stuff. I'd rather you hear it in the car. Plus, the sound in the car is pretty good. Because that's life for most of us, It's not all fucking pink ponies and unicorns fornicating in the grass. And when it comes to New Age stuff and the law of attraction or the law of assumption, people don't want to talk about how after the ecstasy, you're going to be doing the laundry. When I lived at a Zen center, one of my jobs was like I cleaned the the head Zen teacher, Roshi's house, and like there was some issue with mice, right, and it was like, well, what are we gonna do, get rid of these mice, and like, Roshi was like, well, we gotta just use this poison. We'll put it down there and. Law of attraction community, law of assumption community doesn't want to hear this a lot of the time. They don't want to hear about the failure that is inherent when you're trying to improve your life. A lot of the time, you're going to fail, quote unquote, fail. Great teachers like Maxwell Maltz, who wrote Psycho-Cybernetics, they talk all about failure and using failure as a springboard to success. Someone like W. Clement Stone, who is an incredibly successful businessman and self-help, self-improvement teacher, always talked about any failure can be turned into an advantage. Stone, associated with Napoleon Hill, was a far better teacher than Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill always talked about that too. Any disadvantage can be made into an advantage if you look at it correctly. Any failure, if you work from it, analyze it, and work from it, can be made into an eventual success of some significant kind. A lot of times it's about awareness and our perspective. And the perspective of a lot of the law of assumption and law of attraction stuff we see on YouTube is that you are going to shoot your wad in 3 minutes and then it's over. Sorry, I'm using a lot of very in your face language today, but listen, it's that kind of video. Um, it's like, yeah, like you're going to manifest something spectacularly in 24 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, and that's it. And you just master these things. It's a law, and that's it. Your life's perfect from now on. And that's such a bunch of fucking horseshit for anybody who's lived and actually analyzed their life. There's a lot to this human experience, as people like to call it, right? A lot to it. And sometimes you gotta, poison the mice that are in your house. And after all these crazy experiences you might have, all these quote unquote highly ecstatic spiritual experiences, you're still going to have to do normal everyday things. You're going to still end up in your daughter's room making a video with the sound machine on, so it's not too distracting to hear your kids screaming. And that's great. That's what it's about, in my opinion. You hear all these incredible manifestation stories. I don't mean to discount them whatsoever. You read some of the stories that like Neville talks about, like in the Law and the Promise, for instance, or some of these testimonials, which I absolutely believe, from people who've applied like law of assumption advice or whatever, law of attraction advice. It's amazing. But then the next question, which very few people ask on YouTube, is, well, what happens next? Did they just live happily ever after? After the ecstasy, the laundry. So I'm going to read from Spiritual Bypassing by Robert Augustus Masters. Spiritual bypassing was not actually a term that I had heard it, but I didn't know what it actually meant up until about a year ago, maybe a little bit over a year ago, when a client mentioned it to me. The term I always used before then was as spiritual materialism, which is Chogyam Trungpa has a famous book called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. And the brief point, if we're going to summate what spiritual bypassing, spiritual materialism is it is making a facade out of our spiritual practice and pretending it's something that it is not actually. And actually, instead of making us more deeply in touch with our humanity and with God, it's actually kind of alienating us from that experience a lot of the time, you could say. So I thought I would read from Masters. What he's talking about here relates to not only illness. He's referring to illness, but illness could be anything that you see as lacking in your life. Like you lack a relationship, you lack money, you lack health, you could say, right? Or you lack the job you want, or you lack, the prestige you want, whatever it may be. Masters writes, there are many people who believe that we are fully responsible for our illnesses, regardless of other contributing factors. Not surprisingly, many of those who adhere to such a belief are firm believers in the notion that we create our own reality, particularly through our thoughts. For them, illness is considered the result of a kind of thought disorder, with negative thinking being the primary culprit. The exaggerated optimism of this kind of belief in positive thinking tends to run roughshod over any dissenting, read, quote unquote, negative opinions. While the concept of positive thinking predates the New Age movement, it has been increasingly usurped by and abused in spiritual bypassing circles to the point that a judgmental, uncompassionate, quote unquote, pick yourself up by your own bootstraps mentality has become widespread and is applied to one and all, including those with terminal illnesses. The idea that we create our own reality and can control every aspect of our lives if only we will it strongly enough. Or I'm going to pause here and say, or imagine it strongly enough, right? Because law of assumption, people, you know what I'm talking about. If only we will it strongly enough has become popularized through much of New Age spirituality, especially through the prosperity consciousness gospel and the laws of attraction peddled in books like The Secret. The shadow elements of these sunny side up, you can have it all concepts should not be underestimated. They have spawned such beliefs as the notion that we are completely responsible for our illness or for anything else that happens to us simply because we, and we alone, have created it. Thus, it is our fault if we have cancer or any other disease. To hold anything else responsible, from environmental factors to genetics, is simply delusion. If we really want to be well and totally believe that we will get well, then we will, of course, get well. And if we don't get well, it must be because we didn't really want to get well. After all, we create our reality, don't we? If we are sick, it must be because we have chosen it for ourselves. Those who adhere to such a belief system leave themselves very little room in which to maneuver when they find out that they have a serious illness. They believe that they have brought it into being, that they and they alone are responsible for it. This generates powerful conditions for the arising of guilt. If I now have cancer, then I must have done something wrong. Otherwise, I wouldn't have cancer. Adherence to this New Age dogma means that rather than fully exploring the nature of our illness, we may be further debilitated by guilt for having supposedly created something as life-negating and unspiritual as cancer. The belief that we literally create our reality often carries a certain grandiosity, uncritically attributing inordinate or impossible power to our capacity for wishing and wanting and imagining, as described in the Magical Thinking chapter of this book. Such me-centered overestimations of personal power are quite natural to young children, but not to adults. Those spiritual practitioners who are caught up in this belief, perhaps influenced by what they have heard from high-profile teachers of New Age spirituality, may feel inflated by the idea that they alone create the reality, but inevitably must become flattened by it, given how far short of their goals they will find themselves. Unfortunately, falling short of one's goals is rarely used as an opportunity to critically examine these beliefs about reality creation, but instead becomes an occasion to shame oneself for having, quote-unquote, failed. So, I'm going to just leave it there. A lot of people watching this are going to absolutely hate this video. Probably didn't make it past my quip about ponies fucking in a field anyway. I look at these law of attraction, law of assumption concepts in a pragmatic, practical way, personally. And most of the people I know who have had considerable success implementing them in their lives do so in a like manner. They're very pragmatic about it. There's a whole huge contingent community online that is not pragmatic but dogmatic about it. And that's their belief system. It is what it is. But for all the reasons Masters mentioned and several others, I think it's destructive and insane. And not healthy for people to follow that. So, yeah. Sound machine's going. A lot of reality to that sound machine. A lot of reality to the holes behind me. when we get real about spiritual concepts and practice, I found it can help us more. And I think a lot of times we have to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, how real are we really being? And as powerful as these tools are, and if you follow this channel, you know I'm just not a naysayer about these tools at all. I'm not cynical about them. But I'm also realistic about them in a way that I know a lot of people are not. And I think if we're realistic about them, they're going to help us and help others a lot more. So, hope that was helpful. I can be reached at radicalcounselor.com.